Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel. Once again, we're going to be talking about Director. Well, within Director, you can do a lot of stuff. And in the previous tutorials, we've actually covered installing Director by hand, using the scripts, and going through all of the different things that you can do with it, which includes running Director server in a container. Well, in today's tutorial, we're going to go ahead and talk about running Director as a systemd service unit. And what this does is provide us the ability to run Director in systemd with its own slice and own memory management with all the different accounting and everything else there. Director actually provides us an interface that will create these unit files for us and will allow Director to A, be run from a virtual environment, or B, within the root system. And it kind of knows its own path and where everything happens to belong based on its installation. So we're going to use the tooling to go ahead and build us our systemd service units for Director server and start the service. So let's get started. Now that we have Director installed, let's go ahead and make a systemd service unit that will allow Director to start via systemd service. Pretty simple. So let's go ahead and SSH back into our Director server node. We know that Director is being run within a virtual environment under opt director. Now, if you notice there, I escalated my privileges to root. And I did that so that I can actually run some of the Director server commands with escalated privileges to create my systemd server unit file. As you can see, I'm tab completing, getting my way to success, and there are 3 entry points. For this tutorial, we're going to hone in on the Director server systemd. Let's go ahead and run that. And that's it. It gives us some instructions on what I need to do to, in fact, enable the systemd service unit. Just because it was created doesn't mean that it'll function just yet. We need to reload the daemon to make it a part of our environment. Before we do that, let's go ahead and explore the systemd service unit. Here we can see it says Director client, there's a network target, and there's an exec start. This is our virtual environment. Had Director been installed on the root system and not in a virtual environment via a package manager, such as DNF, apt, APK, whatever, this would go ahead and be the actual path where Director was installed. Director, within the code base for this entry point, knows where it was installed. So it uses that path to go ahead and populate the exec start. And then it populates the configuration file because there's not going to be any command line switches that we're going to use when we run Director. Everything has to be a part of config. So it stubs out a basic config file, which we'll go look at here in just a second, and starts it in a server mode. It'll restart on failure. It'll restart at 10 seconds on a failure. And it does do some accounting to make sure that we have some insight on what's running and why. And finally, it runs in its own Director slice. That's for, actual C group isolation for the service itself, as well as more accounting and, a better memory footprint and everything else. While Director is light, we also want it to be contained, even though it's not being run in a container. So let's go ahead and poke at this config file before we get into running it. Like I said, it stubs out a default configuration file when needed. In this case, we knew that we needed this config file. Now, all command line parameters that you can specify for Director can be stored in this configuration file. By default, it just gives you the one, which is debug false. If you want to run it in debug mode, set it to true. Pretty easy. We'll go ahead and leave that true for now as we restart the service. So it tells you straight up, you need to reload the daemon in order for this to work. Okay, we did that. Now we know the name of the service unit. It also tells us that. So we can actually just take that systemd control, status, name of thing. It ain't running. So let's go ahead and start it. That was easy. So if we go back into our director virtual environment, we can now begin running server-specific commands. There's no nodes, but there will be soon. So we're going to go ahead and leave this running because this is going to play into our future tutorials as we go in and talk about generating keys for encryption, setting up clients, etc., etc. But that's it. Director is running. It's in a systemd service unit. We have all of our accounting, which you can see here, memory, CPU, the C groups. C groups is our director. If you wanted to follow the systemd service unit, you 100% could, which would give you real-time information on our debugged director. There are no workers. There's no workers after prune, but it is monitoring the environment and waiting for a worker to be ready. Back to the status, you can actually see all of our accounting properties, tasks, memory, CPU, C groups, and that's important. The C group thing is important. Remember, the director is running in its own slice. So we can actually take a look at that CGLS, and we can see near the bottom here. Nope, maybe it's near the top. I missed it. There it is, at the very top. And so yeah, as we can see, director is in its own slice. So it is isolated from a process point of view. Granted, it's not 100% isolation, but it is isolated from the point of view of systemd in its own slice. There it is, willing and ready to accept work. Well, that was pretty easy, right? We ran basically one command, talked about the systemd service unit, and started the service. It's pretty easy. Basically tells you what to do on the screen. Just follow the instructions. I hope you really liked that tutorial. It was quick, it was simple, it was easy, just as it should be. Stay tuned for the next one where we go ahead and do the same thing for the director client. Once we have the director server and client running, even if it's on the same host, we can actually start using director to begin running our deployment. And we'll go ahead and show that, in the following tutorials. Eventually, leading up to the point where we bootstrap an entire cluster and run an actual complex workload across those environments. So stay tuned for that. More soon.